welcome to another installment of the Sales RX podcast. My name is Chet Lovegren, aka the Sales Doctor, and I'm here with my co-host Billy Stein to bring you another exciting episode regarding professional development, how to accelerate your professional development. What is professional development? To what point do we look at personal development? Nobody gets where they want to go by following the status quo. I'm a big fan of the Jim Rohn quote, "Show me what's on someone's bookshelf and I'll tell you what's in their bank account." I think that statement, it goes above and beyond just books. We're going to talk about that a little bit in today's episode. But if you're an individual contributor and you're looking to accelerate your career, it's really important to understand, where should I be prioritizing and spending my time? What should I be looking at tactically? And as a senior leader, understanding what a great program could look like to motivate and coach people to that next level, because it's not just about tactical operation development. It's also about mindset, and also how do we get someone to a higher level of being a consummate professional, because that's a whole skill in and of itself that takes time to learn. A lot of people are good at the job, but they're terrible coworkers or terrible leaders, you know what I mean? And so how do we make them someone that's also a pleasure to work with and that inspires the people around them? So Billy, what's going on, man? Happy Saturday. Got you back in the studio, ready to rock. Love the hat.
It is great to be back in the Inglewood studios with you, man. And I gotta tell you, you look like you're stoked to tell me at the baggage carousel at LAX how excited you are to go to In-N-Out for the first time in California.
I am indeed, yes. Can you believe this? This place looks amazing. I do. I look like a tourist, don't I? Like I'm from Minnesota or something.
You look like I'm about to blow your mind by telling you that they have a private menu.
Yeah. Secret menu. Dude, ask for the chopped chilies. It's so much better. Oh my gosh. I gave him a good joke to use. I said, wow, you look like you're about to go to the beach and shoot your holiday Christmas card with your family. But apparently he didn't want to use that one.
But I feel like that's too real. Like, you might actually do that.
That's what this was actually bought for. We bought this for our family Christmas cards.
For those that don't know Chet, he actually does have a beautiful family, and it does not seem out of question that you might go down to, Manhattan Beach or
that's exactly
Venice
where we're going
Beach
to go.
Or Santa Monica to take your holiday photos. So I didn't want to hit too close to the chest there.
Yeah, we all actually got matching ones. So like my wife has a skirt, my stepdaughter has a skirt, my little, newborn has a skirt tutu thing. My son has a shirt like this. We have matching pants. We're going to wear like a white shirt under it, and we're all going to walk and hold hands. But it's so funny because it was it's totally what I bought this shirt for. And I'm pretty excited because it'll be our first beach photo. Usually for Christmas, maybe just because I'm from the Midwest, I like to do like the flannel, you know what I mean? One year it was in front of a fireplace at a cabin. Last year we just went up to a national park and did it in the woods. So I like the flannel, like fall kind of look. But this year my wife's like, we live in California. Can we play off the fact that everybody else we know is living in miserable conditions right now and we're just walking along the beach? That's a good flex.
Like every year for Thanksgiving, we go up to my wife's family's place. And my brother-in-law and I wear the exact same matching flannel.
Yeah.
Every single year. And I feel like it's to the point where everybody just assumes I only own one shirt.
Yeah. They just think this is your holiday shirt.
Yeah, which is probably okay.
I will let the viewers know we're 4 episodes into season 3 and I only have 2 more Hawaiian shirts. So I'm probably going to have to, so that I don't repeat, buy a couple more.
Yeah, you're going to have to get on Tommy Bahama's website to keep your optics going.
I love it. All right, we're going to jump into today's episode, but before we do, here's a quick word from the sponsor of today's episode, Kixie.
If you've been in sales for a while, you've probably noticed that it's harder than ever to get prospects to answer the phone. It's easier than ever to screen calls, and more numbers are showing up as spam likely on people's cell phones.
And apart from the time spent stuck on the phone waiting for prospects to answer, salespeople have to spend a ton of time entering call notes in the CRM, leave voicemails, and create follow-up tasks in the hopes of having future sales conversations. That's why we use Kixie.
It's the modern voice and texting platform that turns your CRM into a true sales engagement platform. All while increasing your answer rates through cutting-edge technology.
With their holistic approach and seamless integrations, you can enable your reps to spend less time on busy work and more time on having conversations with prospects using Kixie's AI-powered features like multi-line power dialing with voicemail detection, advanced local presence, phone number reputation management, and conversation intelligence.
Not only that, Kixie's team of sales engineers will help you build out advanced workflows and automations at no extra cost.
So head over to Kixie.com kixie.click/salesdoc. That's KIXIE.click/salesdoc. Or click the link in the description. Get a fully loaded 10-day extended free trial for your entire team. You don't even need to put down a credit card, and the trial comes with hours of call credits included. So let's jump into the first section. For those that are repeat listeners, you know the deal. For those that are new listeners, we'll walk you through what we're doing here. This first segment is called Cap or No Cap. And this is essentially where Billy and I find something, whether it's a video on social media pertaining to the topic that we're talking about, a LinkedIn post, or something we see, like maybe even a tweet that's happening, or an article that we find regarding the topic of today. And we kind of give it a rating, cap or no cap. If you're not aware, cap means that it's kind of BS, our BS meter's going off and we don't really vibe with what's being said, and it might just be fodder for the sake of being posted. No cap means that we actually validate that the information is true and actionable. So let's jump into our first clip that we have today. I believe this is a TikTok.
This is
or
a
YouTube short. YouTube short.
I used to wonder why two people could work for the same company, one make twice as much money. And maybe they were the same age, graduated from the same school, live in the same community, work for the same company, and one makes $1,000 a month, the other one makes $2,000 a month. I asked, what's the difference between $1,000 a month and $2,000 a month? I thought, well, maybe time makes some of the difference, right? Some people do better because they have more time. I used to say, Harold ought to be able to do well. He's got a lot of time. If I had all of Harold's time, I could do well. Now, that's got to be dumb, right? Number one, you can't get somebody else's time. A guy says to me one time, he says, if I had some extra time, I could make some extra money. I said, then forget it. There isn't any extra time. Now, if you can't get more time, what could you get more of that would make a difference in economic results? And here's the key word. The word is value. Value makes the difference in results. Value makes the difference. You can't get more time, but you can create more value.
The great Jim Rohn, man, I love the way that guy speaks. It's a value. I think, man, so animated. I love this other one where he talks about how life is risky. Said people never want to take risks, but life is risky. It was risky the moment you were born. Everything's risky. Like, he kind of sounds like he's narrating
like a great infomercial.
Yeah, like he's narrating like a ghost story or something. Like, and then they open the door. Like, but I love Jim Rohn. He's so infectious with the way he speaks and the way he talks. Billy, what do you think? Is this cap or no cap?
I'm not quite sure who he's anchoring to in that video. I think about this example, and I like the parallel he's drawing at the beginning. He's talking about, Chet and Billy both went to the same school. They're the same age. They work the same job. So why does Chet make $2,000 and Billy makes $1,000? Where I lose the message a little bit is with time. And very specifically, when I look at some of the very successful people, one of the things that my eyes have really been open to is that people's motivators generally show up in their work. I can think to a time when I had an AE colleague, and he's a young dad, and his son was growing at like a rate where he needed to buy him like a new pair of shoes every month, but he was in the 99th percentile of size for his age. So his child shoe budget was like $50 a month. And that may not sound like a lot of money, but $50 a month, that's a sizable fraction of a grocery bill for me at that time, who was a bachelor. That guy always had more to play for than I did because he was surviving a family, whereas I was just taking care of myself. And like, if I wanted to go out and have a fancy dinner with my friends over the weekend, like that's what I was working hard for. So I don't think time is the ultimate qualifier there. I do like what he says about giving value, but again, I don't really know who his audience is for. I think that if I'm going to try to correlate that to my daily routine at work and the people that I think are really good at their job, they do give more value because they understand the task at hand a lot better. And if that's what he's trying to say in the short form clip that he's giving, then he's absolutely right. But I do think that there is a pecking order. And intelligence plays into it, especially if time, being an inherently scarce construct, exists, and we want to be done with our work when we're done with our work and not go home and just be working more. Then yeah, I think I agree with him. So I'm going to say no cap.
Yeah, I'm going to say no cap too, but I'm going to draw it to the context of what we're talking about today, professional development, because I took that as, well, I have 3 kids. This person doesn't. So obviously when they're done with work, while I'm doing dinner and bath time and putting people down for their long winter nap, they could be listening to a book on tape, or they could be working out at the gym, or whatever that is, whether it's personal, professional development. I think when he thinks about time is kind of the answer, but to the extent of what is the value per time. So if you think about tactical operation too, it makes me think of Pursuit of Happiness. If you've seen that movie.
It's a great movie.
Yeah. And he's like, I realized that by hanging up the phone, dialing and picking it back up every time, I was losing like this amount of time.
So
I just hit
phone on my ear.
Yeah, I just hit it and hit the ringer and then dial the next number while keeping my phone off the hook, because it saved me 0.5 seconds every dial. So this, in terms of development, you have to recognize where your difference is to your competition. As much as we're a team, other AEs, other sellers, other managers, other RVPs at your company are technically your competition, because you get measured against them. It's just human nature in this world of sales, because it's a performance related job. The one that's most measured on performance. And so when I'm stacked up against others in this measurement game, how do I compete to add more value to my time? And finding those little ways in which you can do that. For me, like, great example, I have a Bluetooth speaker in the shower. So I actually listen to books on tape while I'm doing my whole morning routine in the shower. I shave, brush my teeth, throw on my Crest White strips, get in the shower, do my deal, dry off, put my clothes on, do my hair, all that stuff. That's 30 to 45 minutes. That whole time I just put in my daily reading amount of 30 minutes. And that's actually how I'm on this process where I'm doing a book a week right now through the end of the quarter. That's actually how I'm able to accomplish that, because I'm doing that in the front half. And then guess what? At night, if I need to do anything, my facial routine, whatever I do, because I do try to take care of this ugly mug, I'm doing the same exact thing. And that's another 15 to 20 minutes every night. That's how I'm getting an hour's worth of reading in every single day without doing it during my work day, without trying to do it while I'm doing admin tasks, getting affected, not realizing. I try to find monotonous tasks where I can do it. So it's, when I think he talks about time, if everybody had the same amount of time, it's about where can you get the most value. It's also why if I'm reading a book and I don't get anything out of it in the first 2 chapters, I don't read the rest of it. I'm like, not getting anything out of it.
I love what you said about audiobooks. And like, historically, I used to despise people that would listen to audiobooks and they would say, well, I read this book. And I remember, maybe it was even through one of my professional development books that I read that was talking about reading. When we read, we create the narrator's voice in our head. And even though the point of view is laid out generally for us, we get to create our own point of view. But when it's an audiobook, it's basically like a movie. There is a construct of a narrator's voice, and there is a point of view that they create through musical interlays and other things. But I started doing audiobooks at the gym in 2019, and I love them.
Yeah.
And I still, that's still part of my routine now.
Very rarely when I do get in the gym, that's the one thing I haven't been able to adopt. I still need my hardcore death metal, double bass breakdown music that helps me get over all the exhaustion that I feel because I'm not on a regular routine. But maybe if I was on a regular routine, it would just be like another day at the gym, throw on your audiobook. But yeah, I love that. I'd say no cap. I think you measure the same amounts of time. Where can you get more value for that time? And it's like, you're already spending the same time that Harold is spending doing X, Y, and Z. How can you get more value out of it tactically in your day to day, but also outside of that, when you're doing other things, where can you add value to your time? So, all right, let's do the next one.
Self-development is ruining your life. A lot of self-improvement content will tell you the supposed framework to being successful. But what if I told you it just wasn't the framework that really matters? Sure, for some people, reading 5 books a month helps. For others, waking up at 5 a.m. is the key to their life. But just because it works for someone else doesn't mean that it may work for you. Of course, taking care of your physical and mental health is very important. Learning and reading is really important too. Self-improvement will give you tips, habits, and steps that will will improve your life, but you need to understand what will fit into your lifestyle the best. In this life, there really isn't any type of shortcut. You have to experience to grow, and that growth will bring you the success that you've always wanted. The big thing though is just be patient, don't be too hard on yourself, and know that everyone's habit is a little bit different, so customize it to your own needs.
So something stands out to me there because I kind of had this conversation with someone actually like 2 or 3 days ago. It was probably actually 3 days ago now. And I'm going to say Cap because there are all this stuff of like Andrew Huberman that's out there. There are scientific principles that are being shared that actually show how people can make change. And that's essentially what you're trying to do when you're developing yourself. You're making change. For me personally, one of the things on development that I've always struggled with is like the physical health side. My mental health is great. My job performance is great. I feel like I'm a pretty darn good husband and father, right? Can always be better. But like, I feel like there's so many things that I need to be great at in my life that are great. That is like the one thing that I've always struggled with, staying in a consistent physical health routine. And the reason I'm starting to learn more about this and acknowledge that is because I've been trying to fit the gym into my lifestyle instead of adapting my lifestyle to get into the gym.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to get to 5 days a week. I'm at about 2, which is better than 0. But it's because I do slump back into living my lifestyle and not adapting my lifestyle to getting into that physical regimen, because there are scientific things about how your brain works. So I don't think like, do I think everybody needs to get up at 5 a.m.? No. I know a lot of successful people who don't get up until 7. You know why they don't get up until 7? Because they don't really have to be at work until 10. You know, like when I watch PTI, I think about Tony Kornheiser and Mike Wilbon. They're on the East Coast. I'm like, how do they watch these games until like 1 or 2 in the morning when they're on the East Coast and then still have because they're on the East Coast. So they're probably getting up at like 10 o'clock every day. And their day starts later because they're on the East Coast and their job is to basically watch every last game until the end of the night so that they know what they're talking about the next morning. So I don't think that per se all the rules always apply, but I do think that if you follow that specifically, you can go, well, drinking coffee within the first 90 minutes, inserting caffeine into my body, that's irrelevant because that works for me, even if Andrew Huberman, a neuroscientist, says otherwise. Well, no, he's saying it because that's how your brain works. So I think there's a lot of stuff that you do need to adapt your life to, because that's the whole point of change, is sacrifice. And if you can sacrifice the way that your life is working to implement something you need to, that's when you're actually going to care about it and accomplish it. Whereas if you're like, oh, just laissez-faire, like I'll fit it into my lifestyle where I see fit, I just don't see change that way. Speaking more from like the things I've been able to conquer in my life as a husband, as a father, as a business professional, right? We're still working on the physical side of it, but my mental health, learning how to insert those things based on the recommendations that have been made versus trying to just fit them into my lifestyle where I see fit. It was the former that actually allowed me to adapt them. So I'm actually going to say that I'm going to say cap to that. I think there's a reason that stuff works. I'm not saying you have to do all the guru stuff, but there's a fine line between guru and what actually does work.
So I agree with you. I think that being a good husband and being a good father and being a good entrepreneur and being good to yourself is a lot to juggle. And when I think about my own journey, I actually agree with a lot of the things he says, because the entire self-development world does have a couple of predatory practices.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you talk to the wrong person who's into it, and they'll tell you if you're not waking up at 4:30 and running a marathon and taking a cold shower before you gratitude journal for an hour, then you're never going to be great. I just don't agree with it. And from my own experience, when I started getting into professional development, and there's a lot of cross-pollination between professional and personal development, I think I indexed so heavily on the professional side, thinking that if I do all of these things that some person with a expensive production crew for a 40-second video does, then that was what was needed to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And I forgot that a lot of these people are saying these things to sell courses. or do whatever else. And for me, what ended up happening was like, I worked really hard to polish some professional rough edges, but I left a gaping hole in my personal development.
Mm-hmm.
And the point of doing all of this development is to be the best version of yourself. And if the best version of yourself is not waking up at 5 a.m. and is not going to the gym 5 days a week because you have other priorities, then attitude's the way we talk to ourselves. And you have to think about that in terms of, I need to be the best version of me. And if somebody else's checklist is not the best version of me, then I'm going to do a lot more bad for myself than I'm going to do good.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to say no cap. I agree with him.
Hey, I love it. It's good input. All right, we're going to jump to our next segment. But before we do, here's a quick word from our partner in the podcast space, Content Quarterbacks.
You're probably wondering how we can both work full time, produce a podcast from the Inglewood studios, and still find time to enjoy our lives.
It's because we partnered with Content Quarterbacks to help produce our weekly podcast.
Content Quarterbacks is a full service digital media production company. They will help you ideate, create, produce, and publish your B2B podcast.
Not only do they provide us great content to share with the SalesRx community, they also help us publish our podcast on multiple platforms. They review and track our audience analytics and episode performance, all while providing strategy sessions to ensure that we're bringing the highest quality edutainment to you, our listener.
If you're in the B2B space and want to have a great show like this, you can click the link in the description below and book a free consultation with Content Quarterbacks.
So stop thinking about creating content and start doing it. Now let's get back to the show.
So in this section, Billy documents professional happenings that he finds in his career in his little black book, and he brings them to the podcast and we talk through them, a little bit of education on what they are, why they're important, and try to get a little tactical with some of the information as well, so that we can provide, some great acceleration for all the listeners of the podcast on how to get in front of these potential trends or professional happenings. And so today we're talking about professional development. Big part of it is obviously how do you accelerate your professional development? What extent is there professional versus personal development? So let's dive in. Give us a 411 on what we're talking about today in your segment, Billy, and why it's important.
Yeah. So when we decided that this was going to be our topic of conversation today, I got pretty excited because I've had my own journey of professional and personal development, and so much of this cross-pollinates, and there's so much overlap between who we are as a professional and who we are as a person, because the experiences we have in the job are transferable life skills that we create to be better once we close our laptops for the day. And I've had the great fortune of being at a couple of really great companies, and I've always known I wanted to be a leader of people, and it's always been reinforced by being around great leaders that make it seem so effortless to manage enterprises of 1,000, 2,000 employees. And the learning lesson that I took, I kind of thought at the beginning professional development was going to be one of these things that I sprinted for a few years and got better because I would listen to sales podcasts or read books about it. But the reality is, like, sitting in rooms with all these great senior and executive leaders, they're constantly unfinished products. And like, I look at the two of us, I think we're both very much in the formative years of our careers right now. Me as a sales leader, you as an entrepreneur. And I'd be darned to say, like, if the things we've accomplished now are as good as they're ever going to be, it's going to be a pretty limiting career for us. So
Yeah.
Kind of thinking about the topic of professional and personal development, it's a long game, and all the great executives out there, they're all constantly trying to get to that next threshold, to take on that next challenge, to get that next seat. And so when I was thinking about it, there's two areas of development that are intertwined between personal and professional development, and two things to focus on. And that is that they need to be practical and they need to be holistic.
How would you define practical and holistic for people that are listening?
Yeah, when I think about it, practical is just that you're biting off small chunks and you're finding things that are very visible that you can aspire to. And holistic in such a way that you keep task with, I want to be the best version of myself. I don't just want to be a great boardroom executive. I want to be a great husband. I want to be a great member of the family. I want to be a good friend. I want to be a good member of my community. That's really what I mean by holistic.
So we're talking about like practical, possibly tactical. Talked about routine a little bit in the last clip. So are you a 4:30 a.m. cold shower guy? Is that something you've done?
I'm not a cold shower guy at any hour of the day.
Yeah.
Unless it's 120 degrees outside and I need to cool down a little bit. But no, I do know some people that swear by cold showers, and I know there's a lot of studies that are out there that say it's good for your immune system. It's just not my desired temperature rate for water when I'm trying to clean my body.
Yeah. I'm a cold shower guy, but not like it's like 5 minutes for me. Like boom, you know what I mean? I do, and it's not 4:30 in the morning, but there is and I would say it's probably not freezing cold, but I definitely don't do warm water anymore. And especially now as it's starting to get colder out here, it definitely does help like acclimate my body, but it's not for any of like the guru reasons. I was just like, okay, like I can take like it's probably, let's be honest, it's probably lukewarm at best, but I definitely do notice a little bit more mental clarity when I've gotten out of like when I take a really warm shower, I walk out of that and I'm like sleepy. It's like being under a warm blanket. So this is actually, it has helped me, but geez, 4:30 a.m. All right. So as we're talking about this, practical approach, bettering yourself in professional development, there are a lot of different formats, mediums, and books are a big part of it. And I would love for you to give the listeners an example as someone who's leading sales teams, like what's something you're trying to develop right now? What's your mindset and your process behind that? And then what are you currently reading to achieve that outcome, whether it's skill or personal initiative or something relating to mindset? Give them a good example so they can kind of go back to the table and go, okay, applying that to my own world, this, and this, and kind of follow that same journey.
Yeah, I think earlier in my career, I was reading a lot of methodology books. If you're of a certain age, then everybody was reading Spin and Challenger, and that's
Gap
where
selling.
exactly a lot of methodologies were created around that, and that is important because it helps build a base. When we talk about books, though, Jeb Blunt's my favorite sales author. I like that he's more on the behavioral psychology side of things, and that helps a lot with learning how to react in certain situations and just mastery of self. Because if you understand the way you're going to react to things, you can better understand how somebody else is going to. But nowadays, when I read books, they're a lot more pointed at a situation or an experience. One thing I've been doing with my team is, I have a relatively small sales team that I lead right now, which means I get to have a lot more face time with everybody. I have a lot more time to listen back to calls and figure out behaviors. And one thing that's hypercritical is like, there is not a single thing that I would ask my team to do that I wouldn't do in their place. And when it comes to reading, we've been doing book clubs on my team recently. Not full team. It's actually been one-on-one with me and reps. But the book I'm reading right now is called The Power of Voice. And it's written by Denise Woods. And the reason we got into doing it was because I have a rep. She and I have similar backgrounds where we actually both use the product that we sell before we came to the company. We have a lot of perspective that we can give to anybody. And the hope in a sales process is that you can create dialogue. And if you do it well, you challenge a buyer to think about the world as much bigger than the prism for which they look through things. So we started reading The Power of Voice. And our goal that we want to get out of it is not only do we want to be assertive with giving our point of view as two people that were successful using the product that we sell, but also there's a certain way which we communicate. And there's a difference between pushing your voice out of the front of your mouth and the middle of your mouth. It hasn't gotten me any friends in my gym. I'm listening to the audiobook. There's a lot of vocal exercises. I do every one of them. My neighbors look at me like I'm a weirdo. And I hope that the general loss of friendship around my people that I cohabit with results in good professional development. But it's been an excellent experience. And importantly, these give me a chance to bond with the members of my team in a way that goes beyond the pale for just the normal standard operating procedure we go through every day.
That's awesome. I like that. I think it's really smart to do. And especially if your team is, if you're able to get buy-in and you built that culture ahead of time, I think that's a really good way to pursue things. Because you get on the same page, you have a unified goal, feels a little bit easier to read stuff when you're reading it together with someone. Dude, I love that. That's great. So let's talk about your path to professional development. So you're an RVP right now, you're leading a sales team. As you called out, like if this is the best our careers ever get, there's probably very, very limiting opportunities,
Right.
but more than likely, this is the worst it's ever going to get because we're going to keep going from here. I mean, I think our professional trajectory speak for that and our desire to achieve more. So how do you think about professional development as you're trying to reach to the next level, and how have you thought about professional development up to this point?
Yeah, I think of it as an exercise in practicality, because you could read 1 million books, watch 1 million TikToks, do whatever you do to be better. But if you can't implement something small, then you can't implement things when they get bigger. So when I think about my own professional development, I think about practicality.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that was I could read 1 million sales books. They exist. They're out there. You could.
Yeah.
And that's great because I'll learn quite a bit. But if I can't use one small thing from every sales book, then it's dead time. So when I think about my own journey, I always knew I wanted to be a sales leader and then ultimately a senior executive at a company, whatever trajectory that may take me. And so what I've done that has helped me a lot in this journey is, it sounds like the easiest thing in the world because it is, but I just observe the leaders that I'm around that I look to copy a lot of their successes and live them out in my own journey. So just observing people and the way they go about their day, their month, their year has helped me a lot.
Which is great because there was a second clip we didn't do in cap or no cap today. And the whole point of the clip was we were trying to decide which Jim Rohn clip we wanted to do the most. And that Jim Rohn clip said, if you want economical success, study economics.
Right.
And so same thing. If I want corporate success and to be this type of person, then let me study that type of person. So that's super smart.
And it's critical. And it's in the business. We're not in the business, but living in Los Angeles, the business being the entertainment business, they'd call that method acting.
Mm-hmm.
And like, here's some examples of method acting that I've used and replicated and use again and again. And they've helped me out a lot. The first thing that when I find a leader I look to emulate, first you look at the way they dress, right? Like their appearance is the first thing you notice about somebody. And in the tech world, everybody, for the most part, might dress like you earlier in their career.
Darn it.
But I notice even for me, compared to the leaders, like they always looked well kept.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew if I wanted to dress for the job I wanted, that meant I needed to adopt the uniform.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that uniform I'm talking about.
Puffer vest.
Untuck it
long
shirt.
sleeves, yeah.
Yeah.
See, I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm going for the Steve Jobs thing. I can wear the black turtleneck with the jeans and the New Balances if I want. I choose for the Hawaiian shirts. I actually don't wear these ever really outside of this podcast, which is what's funny.
Well, that's a shame.
I know.
Because you make it look so good.
Oh, yeah. There we go.
All right. Now, the second thing that I look at after you see someone's appearance from afar is you take a look at their presence. And when I was observing some of the great leaders, and when I still do that, I mean, I had the benefit of some of my more formative years being fully in office where you're sitting in a meeting room with somebody when you're having a meeting, but still do the same even on Zoom. And I look at just their body posture in meetings, something that I'm constantly working on because I'm always caffeinated. I'm moving around
Yeah.
and maybe a little less stoic than everybody else, but started observing like their presence when they're speaking to a customer, when they're speaking of a customer. And, you know, when something gets thrown at them, be it good or bad, their body language when they react to something, do they have a good poker face? And the good ones usually do. Or does bad news like completely rattle them? And the other thing was when they are given a situation, a problem to solve, a task at hand, how do they go through decision trees? And one of my greatest mentors I ever had, a guy named Chris Petros, he was a missile systems engineer before he got into, you know, revenue operations and then ultimately marketing.
Wow.
You could always see him acting like a consultant. And one of the things that he made me do is he gave me a video one time, and it was, I think McKinsey has example interview scenarios, and they make a consultant go through a decision tree. So every time he was given a task, or anytime you ask him a question, there would always be an answer. It was, there's two things that you need to think about. It's like you could see the decision trees going in his head when he was thinking through something. And that was really valuable because if you want to think bigger, you need to know how to think bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I've been lucky and privileged enough to be around some great leaders that do have a great way which they think through any given situation. Now we're talking about reading, right? And when I talk to great leaders, they make recommendations on what to read. They tell you what they're reading. They tell you why they're reading, and they tell you what to get out of the content that you consume. And it was always fascinating to me because here I would always be, my general method of acting for so long was I have the hard copy of a book and I got a pen and I'm underlining things and I'm writing notes on the pages because I went into it with the impression that like if I'm going to read a book, I need to have a takeaway from every section of it.
Mm-hmm.
But no, the thing that great leaders do is they say like, if I walk out of reading this book and there's one great thing I can take away and go make part of my general logic framework, I'm going to be more successful. And that was something that was really, really big for me because now when I read a book, if I'm in a section of it that's not really relevant, and as you know, like any book gets dated quickly because the world changes, I can just look for something foundational and I can move on so I can invest my time properly into something that matters, which at the end of the day is general prioritization, which great professionals are really good at prioritizing. Another thing that I observed is like, how do great executives get their news? And this is a twofold thing because, you know, I don't read newspapers. I don't know if you read newspapers. I generally...
Newspapers exist.
They still exist in there.
Funny. I'll rewatch like an episode or two from a sitcom from like even like 2003, 2005. And it's like they're there reading the newspaper. They talk about the newspaper. And I'm like, that was actually still a thing. That's kind of wild to think about.
It is wild to think about. And like, you know, the new way of getting news is like you read an article on Twitter or on TechCrunch or wherever it is that you get your news from. And it wasn't just that they were reading it in a way that was consumable for them to be on the go and ingesting new information, but it's the way they talked about it. And it was, for me, the eye opener was you got to be aware of the world around you because a great leader and their presence and the way they communicate with people, they know a lot of things and they're able to communicate on a lot of things. And I think the term that my BDRs used to use was, you got to be relevant. They're relevant. They're relevant to the world around them.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing that was so critical for me, I'm still, I guess you would consider a newlywed, but the way they would talk about their families and their life outside of work, and whether that was their spouse, their children, their significant other, even just their family, you know, there's a certain amount of polish that you notice about them, and you realize that these individuals are living for a much bigger life outside of the boardroom that was a big part of my professional development. And in reality, our personal lives and our professional lives are so intertwined because you spend so much time with people that you want to get to know these people. Just the way that they would speak about their lives outside of work. I mean, that was part of my ambition, and that was very motivational for me. And it was a big part of the person that I chose to become.
And that's why professional development.
You just made the list.
New sound clip we've been waiting to use. No, I love all that. And I think you really hit on something important in that last one that I've always found really interesting is like, what does that life look like when you get to that level? I don't think anybody would admit that. And because I've seen it and I see it from people that are above me in some form or fashion, and myself as I've continued to accelerate my career, the higher up you go, the little bit more lax you have it to some extent, like in terms of like how much time you can spend with your family and to what capacity you can do that. You know, when I was a brand new seller, obviously I was a bachelor at that point as well, so it's a little bit different. But if I was a brand new seller now with the family that I have, I wouldn't be going on vacations. You know what I'm saying? But right now we're planning our Christmas vacation. We always go like right before Christmas, typically come back on like Christmas Eve. But we're going to go to Utah for a couple days, go to a cabin in the middle of nowhere, make some snow angels, go down, do some sledding, maybe see a wild animal or two, just get away, get in nature, get somewhere where we can see some snow because I miss it because I'm originally from the Midwest. For those that don't know, it's a fun holiday thing that we can do. I wouldn't have been able to do that as a new seller. Even as a frontline manager, it was like we do like one mini vacation a year. We still have our Keystone vacations, but we do stuff all the time where it's, hey, my best friend and his family are going to be in Phoenix. Let's go down and visit them. You know what I mean? Like they're going to be there. Let's go meet up with them. We drive down at 6 hours away. I wouldn't have been able to do that. Not only because I think you make more money the higher you go up on the ladder, but you also learn how to value. I think as you professionally develop, you learn where to put the value in the things you want to do and what's more important. Unless I'm just kind of speaking out of my ass there. But
no, I don't think you are. And I think that what you're mentioning, you're talking about balance. And I think that's a piece that, conceptually speaking, like your life, the lower down the corporate ladder you are, should be simpler. Mm-hmm. Meaning like my tasks are very pointed and I'm going after one thing and one thing alone. That's, you know, my backlog or my quota or whatever it may be. I've always actually found that it's harder for me to be content to get away the higher up I go. And the way I look at it is like, I mean, even just rooting day to day, this morning before I came to the Inglewood studios to shoot, like my CRO and I were talking about a deal. Saturday morning, it was 8:30 in LA. It was 11:30 in Ohio, where he's from. But when I take a vacation, there is that bit of worry. And that bit of worry can be like me asking my boss, hey, can I take a week off to go to Europe with my wife?
Yeah.
Or could be like, hey, I haven't taken time off in 6 months because I've been so focused on the team and doing what we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. And I almost feel like it's harder to get away because I think that your scope expands the higher up you go.
Also timing. You guys are at the end of your fiscal quarter, like you called out last week. So it's like, yeah, I got to take that call on a Saturday
right.
at 8:30 a.m. But I mean, like reality is you don't hear SDRs and AEs talking about how they're taking their families on a weekend trip once a month or something. You know what I mean? I feel like now that I'm an entrepreneur and I'm in the position I'm in, I can do that. And even when I was like leading a global sales development team, I was doing that. Obviously, money is a part of it, and you make more money the higher up the corporate ladder you go. But I think you also filter out a lot more of the BS stuff you think you care about, and you just find time on the weekend to focus with your family or to make more time for your family instead of going like, I want to go do this thing. It's like, hey, where can I get my family together to go do something? And
right.
I mean, you know, and especially as my kids get older, you know, I know people that are CROs that are 5-10 years older than me, and it's every day after work, they're doing something. Baseball practice, football practice, ballet, jujitsu, this, that, the other activities out the wazoo, kids getting appreciated at school for something. And it's like, well, when do you have time for yourself? And it's like, at that point though, their self becomes their family. But it's to what you said. I love that part of it too, is like when we're in a conversation, we're talking about something. Are you like, how much, like, I love seeing other people talk about their families, because I'm like, that person knows what's up. And it doesn't mean if you don't talk about your family, you're a POS, but it's like emulating that, because half the time I'm on a call with anybody, I think like people are probably like, Chet, stop talking about your kids. It's just like, oh, they're doing this crazy thing. But even today, what was the first thing I was talking about? I was talking about my kids when you walked in the door. And then I was on a call with a friend of mine yesterday, and we spent like 15 minutes talking about, you know, one of my kids is at this age, my other one's at this age, and that dynamic is really weird, and yada, yada, yada. And so,
but that matters. Like, balance is a part of personality.
Yeah.
And when I talk about my wife to my sales team or to my colleagues or even to my boss, I don't call her my wife. I call her Zoe. They all know that her happiness is a part of my happiness. So I think when you think about balance and you think about personality, you need to be able to shut off the professional self at some point to focus on the personal self, which is why so much professional development gets crossed into that self-development piece of it that's about being better when the laptop is shut.
Yeah. No, totally agree.
All right, moving to our third and final segment. This is Doctor's Orders. This is the part of the show where you, the listener, submit your questions and go-to-market challenges to get perspective, tactical, and practical approaches by the sales doctor himself.
Doctor is in!
Let's rock it. What do we got today?
All right,
Billy?
Chet, you got a couple of pieces of fan mail about development.
Yep.
So let's go to the first one here. Doctor, what percentage of my professional development should be spent on mindset and motivation versus tactical operation?
Yeah, so real straightforward. I think it depends on where you're at in not only your career, but the company you're at. So my take on this is, when you first start somewhere, let's say you're new to sales or you're new to a company, I would say 100% just go tactical. Get really good at the job really fast. And then it's just by human nature that you're going to start getting a little burnt out. You're going to need some of that mindset and motivation stuff. Then go 100% that way. Then once you've kind of recouped and regathered, then you find your healthy mix, 50-50, maybe 60-40. But start just like, how can I get really good at this job? Put in a lot of time, put in a lot of effort. Your first 90 days are so important. And then it's like, okay, now I'm getting a little burnt out. Maybe I need more of that mindset and motivation. And then you kind of commingle the two. If you're further in that career path, I think it's relevant to what you're trying to accomplish now. I think starting off 50-50 might be good, but it depends. Like, you might be motivated, but you're like, I'm just not achieving what I want to achieve. And now I'm feeling demotivated. Well, you're demotivated because you're not hitting your targets, or are you demotivated because you're just burnt out overall because you've been working so hard? Then start more on the motivation side. If it is because you're missing your revenue targets, then just start on the more tactical side and sprinkle in some of that motivation. But especially if it's like new to an occupation or new to a company, I think you start fully tactical, then you go mindset after the honeymoon period, then you kind of commingle the two from there on out.
So, Chet, we have a lot of listeners to the pod that are in the startup world. And you also work a lot with BDRs and you work a lot with AEs. So when you talk about get immersed and get good at the job at the company you're at, where do you draw a line between like, all right, memorize the playbooks and the technical documentation, everything your company provides, with like going outside of your company logins to find information that helps you develop?
Yeah, I think most of it is actually, in terms of tactical operation, I'm not even thinking internal company stuff. That's just your guidebook for how to be successful at the company. But if you're looking, let's say you're an AE and you've been mostly relying on SDRs and BDRs for your opportunities, and now you're at maybe a company that's pre-Series A. Let's say you went from Series A to pre-Series A, and now you're at a company where they're like, hey, maybe we have 1 or 2 SDRs for a 6-person AE team, just adding whatever opportunities wherever, but our AEs kind of pretty self-reliant on generating their own opportunities. That's not a muscle you've flexed in a while. So go learn that again, or find better ways to do it and improve upon that top of funnel activity that you haven't done a lot of before. Because unfortunately, most companies tell you what to do, not so much how to do it. There's not, I've never been at a company before where in our sales playbook, when they're talking about opportunity generation, they're actually like writing out their methodology behind a cold email or their framework for a cold call. It's more like, oh, here's our call script. Here's how we think about it. But there's not like the kind of stuff you can get from like skill boot camps and trainings and enablement that lives out there. So I think company documentation and processes are good, but I'm always thinking outside of that, because that stuff exists. You should immerse your stuff in that, know how to do the job well, but it's about covering the skill gaps that you have that are required by the job.
To you, does mindset dictate motivation, or does motivation dictate mindset when you're going into a role, independent of where you are in your career?
Yeah, I think that motivation dictates your mindset. I could see where it could be the other way around, but for me, it's like, if I'm not motivated to do anything, where is my frame of mind? When you think about like what they call the process of action, it's like what has your attention is going to dictate your thoughts. And so I kind of think of it like the same way. Like if I'm not, I think motivation is like the core of anything. Of course, you could say, oh, have a growth mindset. And if you have a growth mindset, then you're motivated to do things. I could definitely see that in action. But I think there needs to be some sort of internal motivator to even get you to that mindset. I'll give you an example. There is definitely a different mindset I take now that I think about the family I have to provide for as motivation. Like I think of like Fences. You ever seen Fences?
Mm-mm.
All right. So play with James Earl Jones back in the day. Denzel Washington ended up doing a movie. And like the son comes up to the dad at one point and says, "How come you never liked me, man?" And then he gets into it. He says, "Who the hell says I have to like you? I'm a man. It's my job to provide." Now, I love my kids, but the way I think about it is like, that is my core job. Even if there are some people I don't like working with in my capacity in my job, but I adjust my mindset and power through it because I'm motivated by my kids. So I had to fire a customer 2 weeks ago. I fired that customer because I got to the point where it was just like, I can't, for the good of my business, like this is actually like devaluing my business. There's another customer I'd like to fire, but I know that business provides opportunities that I'm not thinking of outside of this immediate engagement. And so that growth mindset that I have at the core is spurred by my motivation that like, hey, at the end of the day, I'll take as many jobs as possible because I want to feed my kids and build them a great future. And then I have the mindset that's appropriate within that, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I actually think it's the opposite. I think your mindset is going to dictate your motivations, because a mindset is about, here's who I am, here's where I am, and here's where I want to go. Motivation can change with time. Once upon a time, my mindset was, I want to be in the C-suite of a company. I think I want to be a COO, because I watch so many companies as a salesperson run ineffectively. And I think if I were the ultimate string puller on the operation in terms of making it run efficiently, then that's where I'm going to be my happiest. Well, that changed. That motivation to become a COO over time, that wasn't the end game. Now the end game makes me realize that I am much more effective on the pre-sale side of revenue, which means I want to take my trajectory along the sales path. And that mindset to grow does not change. However, the motivation to want to be involved in more things beyond the way we brand and sell our product or service, that may change over time. That fluctuates. It's the same thing in a marriage. My wife and I, we both want to be great partners to each other, and that's our mindset. But our motivation is going to be circumstantial based on whatever life throws at us at any point in time.
But I think you're also crossing the line between motivation and goal there. To me, motivation is,
maybe I am. Yeah.
Can I take the covers off in the morning and go do what I need to do? So I guess motivation, it also depends maybe in the situation, like what does motivation mean to you? Because I think in your context, motivation for you is more like, hey, I'm motivated to this thing, which I would probably call that thing a goal. For me, motivation is like, what separates me between, especially as an entrepreneur, getting up and doing what I need to do, whatever that might be, versus saying, you know what, I'm an entrepreneur. I work for myself. I just take the day off. Go hang out with my kids. Then my wife will take them to the park. Maybe I'll play some video games for a little while, watch a movie. Like, what separates that difference? So for me, my goals are always changing. But what is motivation to me is the ability to choose to do the right things over the things that are not going to positively affect you. And then your mindset kind of, I think, dictates that to some effect. Because if you're not motivated, guess what? You're going to have a fixed mindset most likely. And if you are motivated, then you're going to most likely have a growth mindset. But I can see the other side of it where it's like, hey, if I can choose to have a growth mindset, then I will be motivated to do these things. Hey, if I choose to have a fixed mindset, I'm probably demotivated. So I can see the argument for both sides.
And that's why you're the doctor and I look like I'm about to pour you a Miller High Life at a dive bar.
See, I can't come up with the roasts, man. I am not a roaster. You are definitely the roast master deluxe. That's for sure.
All right. So we got another one. You ready for the second bit? All right. Says, doctor, when do you know it's time to start investing financially into your professional development, and where would you start? Any recommendations?
I think when you've hit the peak of what you know you can accomplish with what you've already done. I got to a point with this in sales as an individual contributor. I got to a point this with management, leadership. I got into a point with this in entrepreneurship where I hit this peak and I'm like, look, no more YouTube videos, TikTok videos, books at this point. Working around other people is going to take me anywhere I haven't. What's the secret sauce that's being gatekept that I need to pay for? And let's talk about it. You're actually already paying for it if you buy a book. So it already kind of starts to some effect. But maybe this question, I know this came in from my Slack community, from probably maybe an AE if they're asking this question, maybe a new SDR, because they're like, when do I have to start paying for a course? Which I think is what this question's rooted in. I'm a little skeptical about courses. I'm more interested in like development programs. So I don't believe in the, hey, you want to go from SDR to AE, buy my course. That's why my SDR to AE initiative is a program. There's course material, course-like, it's instructor-led, go at your pace, but it's also an open community for people to get questions and answers to, and templates and all these other sorts of things that they can use to track their professional development. The AE Acceleration, it's a program. I don't just say like, oh, hey, go pay $1,299, $1,299, because similar programs exist, and go through my course that could basically be a book that I'm packaging as a course because it stretches it out over time and allows for the forgetting curve not to impact you, as opposed to a book that you fly through all at once and you might forget certain things. It's an actual program. People will submit pieces of information like deal cards basically and go, I'm lost. Can you give me some opportunity coaching here? What am I missing out on? So I think that it goes above and beyond just buying a course. It's about where can I put money in. Me professionally, I have coaches here and there for different things. I have a business coach that I work with and an executive coach, which I enjoy. But the first executive coach I had was a little bit too, I felt like they were taking my money and running, just like trying to raw me up. And I'm like, no, can I get a little bit more tactical on the executive side? When I was in SDR leadership and then was director of growth at Pavilion, I took a lot in from my direct boss, but I also knew the impact of looking for someone that maybe provided some coaching and forking out a little bit of money to get that, or joining some sort of leadership program. So I think when you look at people too, like if you're interested in a course or if you're interested in joining like a coaching program, I think another important thing too is to look at more than just their LinkedIn following, for Christ's sake. The bigger someone's LinkedIn following is, the more scrutiny that person should be met with. And so it's funny because I join podcasts sometimes with others and do like on-demand coaching sessions. And they're like, yeah, and he's got over 10,000 followers on LinkedIn. I'm like, well, let's be clear. That should not be a reason to listen to what I'm saying. It should actually be a reason to put me under a microscope and validate if what I'm saying resonates based on the things you've experienced and the things that you're feeling are on the horizon that you need to change in your trajectory. And I would say if you can get something on the surface from a person that you can't get from someone else at the same medium or format, then there's probably value to paying to be part of whatever that person's offering. But if you go to someone's page with 25,000 followers on LinkedIn and they're selling a cold calling course and you're hearing the same exact thing that you've heard 9 other people say for free on TikTok, you're probably not going to get a lot more out of that person's course. But then if you go and you listen to someone and they say something where it rings true to you and you go, it's like that aha moment, I would say investigate what kind of opportunity there might be to learn more from that person on a more paid level.
Yeah, I think follower count's a tough metric to validate because you don't know how many people are trying to sell to that person that are following them to gain the competitive edge. You also don't know how many people are actively following that person.
You have to be very skeptical about where you're getting your information, especially when you want to move and do a paid model. But I think that's where I've looked at is I've gone, I mean, the people that coach me now, nobody on LinkedIn's probably ever heard of them, but they have coaching programs. I'm a part of them and I've gotten a heck of a lot of value out of them. I don't think a single one of them has more than 3,000 followers. In fact, the best one barely even has a LinkedIn presence, maybe posts once a month. But I've gotten more from him than I probably have out of some of the best books I've read, Granted, I pay him a lot more than a $25 book, but that's because there's very hyper-specific tailored information that's being
more
returned.
Value.
Than a generalized book or course or something like that. Well, that's it for today's episode. Again, we thank you to all of our repeat listeners and first-time listeners for checking out the podcast. Every week, Billy and I come to you with this content. Incredibly excited to share it with you and have this conversation. And we're really glad to see the engagement that we've been getting so far with the new direction of the show and the things that we're doing. If you're interested in engaging with either of us or the podcast further, you can check out the links to our LinkedIn profiles in the episode description. And don't forget to check out past episodes and also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the Sales RX newsletter that delivers bite-sized content in under 3 minutes or less at www.thesalesrx.com/newsletter. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you can give us a 5-star rating and a review as well. And if you don't feel that we deserve a 5-star rating, give us a rating that you feel is relevant so we have the feedback that we need to make this show better because we're always looking to improve. If you're on Spotify, you can do the same thing with a rating. Give us a 5-star rating. You can also click the follow button so that the podcast will publish organically to your feed when we release new episodes every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific. Big shout out to the sponsor of this week's episode, Kixi. If you haven't checked out Kixi yet, they're offering a free 10-day trial with hours of call credits included for your entire sales team. Just click the link in the description below or go to www.kixi.click/salesdoc. That's DOC. That's all we have for today's episode. We love y'all. We look forward to bringing you more content next week. Let's get prescriptive.